Thank you. We're back, and we're going to be hearing a presentation from Public Works, Mark Larkins and Tom Filling.
Good morning.
Go ahead. Good morning.
All right.
Good morning.
On our proposed budget, there is going to be an increase as far as contractual raises,
Right.
and we do have in 3 upgrades that we like for the lowest end guys that we have that are in maintainer 2
Okay.
to step up to maintainer 3. They definitely proved themselves, and on top of that, it makes it more consistent with the crew as far as what we can do and what we can't do.
Okay.
Then when we get to labor work orders, we drop that down because I can only back charge one department now, and that would be transfer station.
Okay.
So that's why that's been dropped down up to a lower rate. Part-time help and seasonal salaries. There's a little bit of upgrade here because it wasn't taken into consideration at the stump dump that during November we're open 6 days a week.
Okay.
So that has to be manned there. And on the snow plowing salaries, with my extra help that I have, the amount of hours that they put in comparative to what it was before, I added a couple more hours to it because we weren't, we were always ended up over.
Okay.
All right. As far as the secretary for the commissions, that's not much of an upgrade.
Yeah.
Overtime, around $100,000 is what we're looking for, and I think that's justifiable with the amount of things that are happening now with the weather.
Right.
As anybody can look at last March, it was very costly with 4 nor'easters.
Right.
Expense and travel, most of that money is funded to help pay for my men to eat during the storms.
Storms. Okay.
I utilize that mostly for that reason. Utilities is pretty cut and dry. We're right down to the number on that.
Good.
That's what was proposed for that. On fuel, we're at 60,000, and I know that consistently through the years it's pretty much averaged that. But according to our meter, the machine that we have that calculates everything that we use, and the numbers that we're given, it would be more realistically at 72,000.
Okay.
But I put this in because I see the consistency that we did have within the last 3 years and stuff of running about 57, 59.
Gotcha.
So we'll go with that number. According to talking with the commission afterwards, we decided that we would stick with
Keep it flat.
60,000. Okay, building maintenance, that's definitely up, and reason being the wash bay issue that we had. We are now, by DEP, we have to wash inside. So we've been trying to restructure our garage to help that out. And we have a bunch of issues with that. The grates for the drains are way too small. The pipeline out to our holding tank is way too small without a clean out.
Okay.
So we've had a lot of major issues with that, and I'm going to need some funding there just for the pump outs alone,
Okay.
because we have to use an environmental service for that
Right.
because of
Oil.
the oil separator. So these pump outs are like, the last pump out was $4,400.
Okay.
To pump out basically 4,000 gallons because it was right up to the top of the neck of the inlet. So that, as we go along trying to wash the fleet, and according to how many storms we have,
Right.
that can get relatively expensive. And we're still working on, between the commission and the town, we're working on a way of getting around that.
How many vehicles get washed in that bed?
Well, if you look at total, we're probably looking at over 20. All right, because with the sand and salt, we still have the loaders to wash too, and the 10-wheeler trucks, the Mason body trucks, pickup trucks that we have, and Park and Rec is also bringing theirs in, because they have to do the same thing as far as wash, so they're utilizing our bay. You're down to a power washer, so that it does cut the amount of volume of water that you would have. I don't think it does as well a job as that we were able to do before. but it's sufficient at this point. And then we're trying to look at another setup where we'll be able to hook up something underneath the truck so that we get the spray where it's actually needed. So that's why, I mean, we've been working towards the wash bay, but again, that's an issue that we talked about further.
But the power washer doesn't really get underneath.
No, because no matter what you look at, the truck looks good, you know, you power wash around, but the main issues that we're having is from underneath. That's where all your splash comes up through. There's a lot of electronic exposed, you know, pieces next to the engine and stuff like that that there's splash up through. So not only is it time consuming, you know, to properly wash that, you know, lesser, using a power washer instead of a high pressure hose. We're not going to get the trucks as clean. That's the bottom line. And not only that, I have to bring 2 sweepers in, a catch basin cleaner every day, and then a vac all in the fall to be washed out that way, where before you had more volume of water, easier to clean. So it affects our efficiency as far as timing wise, is when the guys get back to wash out. So there's a lot of issues involved with that, you know what I mean? But we're dealing with it, you know what I mean? I talked to Matt and I says, you know, we're willing to work with them, and at the time I will just deal with my situation.
So how long does it take to do a truck?
At this
Average
point,
truck?
doing a truck, I would say pretty much an hour. Yep. Because by the time you back it in, then later on the sander has to come out, so we have another machine there to take the sander out, wash the truck. At the end of the day, all the spillings have to be cleaned up. You know, we'll bring them out, and then clean the bay. So there's a lot involved. You know, it's not a very efficient way to do things, but again, we're dealing with it.
Tom, it just brought to my attention, it's pump outs at 4,000, should be 28,000.
Yes, it is. That's a typo.
Typo.
Yep. All right.
But
On there, it was 2,800.
But it
instead of
accrues to
20,000.
the right-hand side, though.
Yeah, pretty much everybody
I
knows.
didn't think you'd miss that one.
I noticed that afterwards.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks for that. Okay, so that's within the building maintenance, which we need a little bit more maintenance in that building to begin with, and then on top of it, I will have to make some changes to make that system work a little bit better. Okay, radio maintenance is pretty much the same. We are, after an injury that we've had to a fellow employee, we are looking at a better communication system with the helmets, and it's on the same channel so that they can only talk within themselves, no interference, no radios, no music, you know what I mean? So this way here, with all the noise involved in the chipper and the loader being there, there's a lot better communication. So we're trying to work around a problem that we see. So that will be part, that we'll work within the scope of that. Equipment maintenance and repair, that's 160. It's running roughly pretty much where we always do. I talked to the commission about it. I'm a little difference with them with that particular.
Good, a little disagreement's healthy.
Yep, so I have to work it out with them first before I can work it out with anybody else. So we will go with that number at 160.
Okay.
Closing and allowance for closing in uniform, that's pretty much been standard the whole time. There's no issues there. Contracted services, we ended up with a little issue with the storms last year in March. We had a pile down stump dump that was immense. It was the amount of yardage that was there. Our allotment usually is $15,000 to have, well, right now we use Durham Middlefield, to come in and grind. And then it's double grind, so that it's useful to the public. Well, we had a lot of problems dealing with that to make it work. And I gotta say, Durham Middlefield cut us a lot of slack. They were awesome.
Right.
They continued at the same price, up to $15,000, actually going over 3.5 days.
Okay,
So they pretty much lost money, but they held true to
to their price.
their number, and I really appreciate it. I let the guy know that was awesome. But in the future, I just felt like we needed to put in that either we're doing it 1.5 times or 2 times, that we need to chip it to keep up.
Okay.
Because not only that, was totally blocking off the stump dump down there as
Access.
far as access for people for leaf pile and everything like that. So whether we are able to do it 1.5, but I think that 1 is just not adequate.
Okay.
So that's why there was an extra cost in there. Hazardous waste disposal, that's Janice, so we're not have to go there. Copiers, I cut way down because most of the copying was done at the engineering level.
Right.
Going to office supplies, there's a little bit of upgrade there because I noticed that we did run out of some stuff last year, so I just put a little upgrade in that. Minor tools has been consistent through the years with that amount of money. It allows us, not only that, but every time the guys need a special bolt or something like that, they're at Pages, or we're going to, what is it, Trailer Depot up there? Not Trailer Depot, Tractor Supply up there, because they hold a lot of the hardened bolts and stuff that we use.
Yep.
So when we need something quick, that's what we use it for. And a lot of the hand tools, I'm trying to update, and we just updated with a grinder that was battery packed one. It's going to save us not only on the material that we are using for the posts on the signs, but the time to take this stuff off because it's all rusted. And already I've seen an improvement in as far as how quickly the change outs are, and the fact that we can still save the post without ruining the post. So this is the type of, as we go along, these little upgrades that we're trying to do to be more efficient. And it's little by little, nothing that we're jumping on. Summer road maintenance, I was up a little higher than this number. The commission basically convinced me that we should go a little bit lower. I'm a little bit more aggressive probably than they want me to be.
They gave up their roads.
Because I'm always looking
Quick.
to go forward, and what I see, and even in the minor, I'll put it as minor fixes. We're going to go through a lot of materials this year. I already have a list of, seeing that we're not doing any major jobs, we will catch up on a lot of stuff that was left behind. Over on 32 County Road, we have a head wall that's already fallen, and we haven't been able to get that for over a year and a half now. And we're changing out the pipe there. We'll realign that with the head walls and try to extend that part of the road that the shoulders are so tight over there as it is. We have trouble getting 2 vehicles to pass at that time. Jacobs Lane has an issue where it's an old culvert made out of stone. It's cutting down the amount of volume that's been able to go through there, and the fact that it's starting to fail. So we made a temporary fix there just to keep that arch in play. And I've been trying to get to that, but with the schedules that we've had years before, I just couldn't get to it, and timing wise too, because you want to do something like that dead of summer. But we will be replacing that with a 2-foot pipe over there, extending out the shoulder in that short distance that we have there. And I have to see Janice again because I guess the permit is not adequate. So we will be working on that too. All right, moving forward to winter road maintenance. It's pretty much in line with what we're dealing with now. I see a little bit of increase probably that we will have as far as our salt prices. I did increase the amount of sand by 200 yards because we've been using more than 2,400 cubic yards in these last 4 or 5 years that we've been dealing with. It's actually better with the sand. A lot of people have mentioned the fact of going all to all salt, but the costs will have to be talked about, but you're talking about an immense difference in this town. And one thing that I want to let everybody know is that this magic salt that everybody thinks is, the best.
Magic.
Yep, they call it magic, yep. Once you get past 18 degrees, which we've had, it basically does nothing. You know what I mean? So at least when you're with the sand and salt, you still have grit.
Okay.
And that's some of the issues that we saw last year and again this year is the fact that the temperatures dropping that deep, nothing works. So we know it. We try to get the road as clean as possible at that point and put some grit down, but from that point, our hands are tied. All right. Road striping and signs, we're roughly staying about the same. We are a little bit behind on the road striping, and we are behind on the signage as far as updating our high reflective signs, as far as there was a mandate, and we're so far chasing that. Equipment rental, again, I was a little bit more aggressive here, but I got cut down. I was making a proposal for the stump dump down there that it's getting out of hand. There's no rhyme or reason. And I wanted to start to consolidate things and make useful material. So I was looking at a screener, number one, and for our topsoil, instead of paying at $32 a yard at this point is what the norm is, generating our own, and also our own road base, which I would talk to Janice about. There's a lot of material down there that if we spend some to save some, and also consolidate that down there. And I don't like that setup, and there's a proposal for a parking lot up there for that, the dogs, well, not really the dogs now, it's the property.
Preserve, East River
that-
Preserve,
Yeah,
right.
that everybody likes to use. And I'm going to discussing that with Kevin as far as where that parking lot would be, and then it would be a realignment for us to come in to make sure that there's no effect, that people are actually not crossing a road. I had a problem with that they would be crossing the road.
Presumably not an impervious surface.
Yes. Exactly. So, in that being done, I mean, so I'll be working with Kevin, because I don't know if they're gonna be doing that this year as far as that parking lot, but I would need a realignment. And I'm looking to, we have a shack there now that has a wood stove in it for burning. We need to update. I'm trying to look at if we realign everything the right way. I could bring a job trailer in that, we could probably pick up at a really cheap price. I could then bring in power, and we would have the pit would be set up where the people would be more towards the front and our stuff would be more in the back. That's where I'm going with it. So I also put in for a crusher, which Mark talked me out of, and justly so, I'm gonna say, because he has his own pit. I respect how he's done with his. He said to me, Tommy, consolidate, get everything ready beforehand. I'm like, yeah, I agree. I'm just getting too aggressive on what I see, so I definitely backed off. All right, permits and subscriptions, everything, I cut that down to $450. Education is just there for the training that I'm gonna need for the tank certification, everything like that, with some of our men there. And going forward, I would like to set up more programs for safety, like, we got trenching and everything else that I would like to, so that our guys are better educated as far as when they're working out there. And that's about it. Ended up with a $2,165,738 as far as our budget.
Good. Questions? Mike?
The difference, engineering had road striping as well. What's the difference between what's in your number and what's in the engineering number?
Yeah, when they just split the budget, she was also, Janice, not she, Janice, sorry Janice. We had talked about it, that the crosswalks did have to be done, and a lot of times engineering before was taking care of that. So we agreed that we would split the price at this point in time, but if I needed to or she needed it, we balanced it back and forth. I'm willing to work with her on
I was
that.
just wondering what goes into the public works budget versus what goes into the engineering budget?
Right.
What, is it geography? Is it a certain type? What's?
It's more of doing crosswalks and stuff like that Janice would want to do with the
Okay.
road striping for the long-term, lines and stuff.
That's the allocation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
To ask you about the salary, part-time seasonal salaries and overtime, and how are you estimating that right now? I see you've got winter storms down there, you've got a whole bunch of things. How many storms are you estimating that we're going to be
Okay,
dealing with?
we've always gone 13 storms, 8 hours, is what they're looking at. We haven't had 13 storms since I've taken over as superintendent. We're averaging about 22. I don't look at it as storms, I look at it as events that we have to go out. So.
Hourly events.
So we're at like an average of 22 compared to 13. And so I did increase the other end of it down to 10 hours, but it always ends up that it's a weekend, so it's overtime no matter what.
Holiday.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
And the amount of time that it takes to take care of the storms, part of that part-time salaries is a guy that I have from the transfer station, so he actually has a route with us. He's part of our team. So anytime that we're going out, his route has to be done. So that's going to really show when it comes to where the money's been taken out. So I accommodated that because I started stepping back and looking at the numbers going backwards. And in the 3-month period, he was at 170 hours last year. All right, so that's why I had to make them different. And I tried to be casual about that difference a little bit on each end of it so that we can hopefully accommodate that. But again, on the storms, I don't know where we're going to end up. Last year in March, like I said, we were looking good until March came, and then it was a lot of hours, So that's something that I have no judgment on there. It was just I just increased it very little, but enough to where I felt that I was comfortable with that number. So that's it.
How do we stand right now?
At this point, we're not too bad after the last storm. Yeah, I mean,
Still
going
have a ways to-
forward, so far, we've had this last storm that is a hard storm because it's gonna take a lot more material and hours-wise when you have a temperature change like you do. And material, like when it gets to where it's icing, it's always more material and more time involved in it. But that's only one of the events that we've had at this point. So I'm hoping that the weather actually gets a little bit colder because it's easier to deal with snow than these in-betweens. Because even this next storm coming up here, the temperature is supposed to drop to 27. So if there's no time for it to dry during that period, you have to wait. I'll wait out to see what I can do with the wind after it to dry it out. But with the amount of water we're getting, we'll probably have to go out and sand, before the next morning for the schools, and, people in the public in the schools.
Ken, to your question, we had 99,000 in overtime. We've spent to date 32.5, so we've got a little over 67,000 left. Now, mind you, there haven't been that many snowstorms, but we had all the storms in the fall, the nor'easters that were rain and wind,
Yep.
and significant amount of overtime was spent on brush cleanup and
Exactly.
down trees and that kind of stuff.
And
So
there's been a lot more down trees.
like it always is, it's a crapshoot. And actually, at one point, the town used to have weather insurance going back some time. But the problem there was it was a storm measurement system that if it was over 4 inches, it qualified, and then you got your overtime paid for. I think we did that for a couple of years and wound up losing our shirt a couple of years in a row. But that may be a hedge against some of the storms. But the problem is you can wind up with 15 storms of 2 or 3 inches, and you're not going to qualify.
Right.
So,
And I think that's what happened. Yeah,
It
that
did.
they
It did.
didn't qualify in a lot of them. And again, like Matt said, that's why I'm taking events instead of snowstorms. I mean, most of the time it's put in snowstorms, but more it's events where we have to go out.
anything else?
Explain again, you're thinking with the 3 employees that you're essentially leveling out their grades, or you're moving them up a grade?
Okay, they're in a maintainer 2 category,
Okay.
and they, once they get to the end of that category, which is this coming year, they would sit in there unless they're promoted to go to the maintainer 3, which is where most of my employees are.
Okay.
They're all doing the same thing. When you come down to it, I expect them to be able to run a loader and, do pavement and everything like that. So it all comes down to everybody is in the same boat working. And what it does is it causes a little bit of an edge when you're not getting paid the same as the guy standing next to you.
Right.
So that's,
And
if I
this-
get them into the maintainer 3, level just to get started, we're happy with that, and then they can work forward from there. But without being promoted from that point up, they stay in the maintainer too.
Okay, and so that increase is reflected in the full-time salary line? It's about-
Yes.
Yes.
Does that have to happen at the beginning of the budget year? I mean, is there any way of staging that so that, you pick up half a year, or is
Well-
there any way of softening that increase?
You want to take that, Mark? Because we talked about, we discussed this.
Well, Tom came to us before the budget, and not only would they would have got their step, and then they would have got another raise. So we elected to table it for now. These three individuals are good men. So I told Tom to leave it in the budget for now, see how they perform over the next 6 months, and then it's in the budget if we do want to step them up, the commission. So yes, to your point, yes, we could soften it up and, do one at a time or two at a time,
Or just part of the year for all that?
You want-
I wouldn't
Exactly, that's why
suggest-
they're not raised yet. Tommy would have to come back to us, the commission. We would review it again, and if we felt necessary, and money's concerned, we could revisit it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, guys.
I got just one question. I kind of was interested in this, looking at events instead of storms.
Okay.
Because I can picture it, right? It's not necessarily a storm, but
Right.
you've got people out there working. Do you have any history on that to sort of smooth it or average it? Because it sounds like it's something new that you're doing.
Okay, well, I always looked at it as events myself anyways. I mean, and it's been a standard number that was put in every time is 13 storms, 8 hours. That was always, since I've been here, that's been that way. But everybody can see the change in the weather that we have at this point. And the amount of storms, the wind storms that we've been getting, we spent a lot of time. Those are through the night with, working with Eversource, something like that. So it ends up being very costly. So that's why I figured I had to make some kind of change to justify, and that's a subtle change right there, because again, we're talking that 22 events, and that's what I averaged out when I went back looking at the last 5 years. That's what we came up with, 22. The lease was, I think, 14, and one was 35.
And then I was curious, is it maybe your area, department or the fire department that is maybe dealing with some of this high water table issues and maybe helping homeowners pump out basements?
That would be the fire department.
That's fire department, okay.
Excellent. Anything further? As much as you guys are teasing each other about asking for stuff and the commission saying no and the commission saying yes, I think it's great evidence of the true governance role of a commission. So I applaud you for working that closely together to come up with the budget. So thank you very much, both of you.
I think it would be advantageous right now. Back in 2008, 2009, was it, Tom? See, we're in uncharted territories a little bit now because we split the budget with Janice.
Yeah.
But if you go back to 2008, 2009, the budget was $2 million.
Yeah,
We're at $2,165,000.
exactly.
So in 10 years,
Right.
we haven't really raised the operating budget,
And your salaries have gone up.
and the salaries have gone up.
Which is the largest portion of your budget.
Yep.
So yes, Tommy's asking for an increase. He was asking for a much bigger increase, and we nipped him a little bit in half. But I still think, it's a good, honest budget. With the overtime, you can go up to the casino and roll the dice. It's either pay me now or pay me later. I think Tom, is correct. Our storms have been, longer hours and more severe. You could play with, summertime road maintenance, but then you get behind. I think these are realistic, legitimate numbers that Tommy's put in front of you. And I think he's doing a great job. We're very fortunate here in Guilford that we have a public works department like Tommy has, where we do a lot of stuff that most towns would hire out. I mean, if you look at Old Sacham's Head Road, you look at Great Hill Road, you know, all these major jobs that Tommy does in-house saves the town money. So, you know, I applaud him and his crew, and I think that this is a realistic budget that we can work with, you know.
Good. Anyway, I just as a quick follow-up, you know, it was only a couple of years ago, 2016, 2017, that we spent nearly $400,000 on summer road maintenance. This current operating budget that we're in today is $226,000. So, you know, even though I know years ago that, you know, the summer road maintenance was always a pretty significant number, because we had X number of miles of road that we were going to take care of every summer. And rightfully so, during some of the leaner years, post recession years, that's where we want to cut back.
Right.
And
It's important to know that out of that 276,000, 170 to 180 of it is the chip seal program.
right. That's
You know, so what is Tom left to work with?
Right.
Not a lot of money.
Right.
You know, so again, he does a lot for what he has to work with.
Appreciate it.
Follow up to First Selectman's question, how many miles of road are you chip sealing in the summer maintenance program in the budget?
Well, we're down now. Like last year, it was 8.3 miles that we did, and before, the standard was to stay about 12 and a half. But, you know, we haven't been able to do it. With the escalation cost too that we're having with the oil is another issue.
Yeah.
That was pretty high last year, I thought. But, so this year, again, I'm looking to increase, you know, to get to like 10 miles of road at least. I'm already prepping an area, you know, we'll probably be up more towards the Mirror Lane area
Yeah.
that we're working on. So my guys are brushing now to save, you know, to be cost effective really, so that I'll be cleaned up, and then it's less time for me to deal with over there in summertime. As far as the chip sealing, I'm back and forth with that as far as it's useful in certain applications, and other applications, as Janice would let you know, it's better to do an overlay, or, you know, a mill and pave, or a total reclaim. Some of these roads, we do have a book that we got from Council of Governments, that they put their ideas into what they thought our roads needed. And looking at that, you know, we got a lot of upgrading to.
That's right.
So going forward, Janice and I will be working on that too, together, as far as what we think should go down with some of these roads. And it may not be a chip seal. That's where I may need a little bit more money, because bang for the buck, it will be better to end up overlaying something. We've covered quite a bit of ground up north. I mean, I'm pretty happy with how much coverage we've had on those roads up there. We started to do the shim. That's just paving the gutters to raise them and level them, and then we chip sealed. So we spent a little bit extra money on it, but if anybody goes up there and looks at how that's held up, it was definitely worth the money. So it's a little different idea that, you know, when I was talking to Jim, we got a little extra to fund that so that we could do it, and even he agreed that it's holding up a lot better than just chip sealing a normal road, or a road that, you know, maybe a little bit more than a chip seal.
And you know what, that program, the summer road program, chip sealing and certainly rebuilding roads, I mean, it's a first cousin to a capital expense, right? Let's face it.
Yes.
It's a long-term investment in infrastructure for the town. And you know, we appreciate you guys doing what you've done, but that's always under pressure, so.
Yep.
It's not lost on us how much you get done with what you have.
Okay.
Tom, can you refresh my memory? How many miles of road do you maintain? Is it 149 or something?
No,
like that?
it's just
170?
pretty close to 170.
170, that's what I
Yep.
thought.
And it's just the vastness of this town. You know, you're like 12 and a half miles to get to the other end. And then we're also wide. So if you look at around our area, you know what I mean, they're smaller towns, and they're probably spending more money on the maintenance of their roads than we are at this point, so.
All right. Anything further? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you think about it, it should be 17 miles a year.
Yeah, but some of those roads.
Not always chip sealed.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask
Yeah,
that, but
like-
we were done.
Yeah,
So let's say
like
your
nothing.
number was right.
Yeah.
It's 150, so it should be 15 miles a year, assuming you gotta do it every 10 years. And we're doing half that.
Yeah, we're doing 10 or 11, but that was the number for a number of years. We just did 8.
Well, I mean, the price of the oil's gone.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, fire department. Commissioner Wilson is joining us today, with Assistant Chief Shove and Chief Hershad. And we need one more chair.
Good, how are you?
Morning, Charlie.
Good chair?
First of all, good morning, Mr.
Good.
Selectman. I do assume that everybody has the
Yep.
letter and the budget.
Yep.
Don't like this one.
We do?
Good. I first want to start off by saying that the Fire Commission unanimously approved the budget that's being presented today. We did have extensive discussion on certain areas, but we came to an agreement of the budget that's in front of you today, and it was unanimous. Instead of reading the letter to you, I'd like to highlight some of the points of the letter, and then we can move right into the actual line items, if that's okay with you and acceptable. First of all, what's important is the administration took the last 3 years of actual expenditures of the fire department and used that as the starting point of where we should be from a dollars and cents point of view. Secondly, they looked at the future mandated requirements of the fire department based on OSHA, based on NFPA, et cetera. And then also the current needs of the department. And when I say the current needs, I'm going to emphasize needs, not wants, not nice to haves, but needs of the department to operate on a daily basis and to serve the town of Guilford. We do not, in this budget, there are no additional manpower. There's nothing in personnel. There's no administrative increases. There's no firefighter increases as far as personnel goes. To date, it's kind of interesting. As you know, fiscally, we go by the fiscal year, but we also go by the calendar year. Right now, this year, this past year in a calendar year, we were over 354 calls more than we were the previous calendar year. And we're on target right now to hit just under 4,000 calls for service in the town of Guilford. And that includes everything, including pump outs. And that's, when I say everything, that's fires, that's motor vehicles, that's ambulance calls, that's anything, public service calls, whatever it may be. One of the things that this budget does include, as you know, and we thank you immensely, is that last year we accepted the SAFER grant for the 8 personnel that was added to the budget. So you will see increases in the salary line, in fact, all the line items related to salaries. And that program started, I believe it was March 22nd of last year. So overall, the budget that's presented to you today is an increase of $163,042, which is 3.6%. And I will get into the details of that in a few minutes and answer any questions and point out some things to you. One of the other pieces that's always important to the fire department and also to the town is our revenue contribution. We're starting to see, especially since December, we're starting to see a little bit of a downtrend in some of the insurance receipts that we get back. There's only a certain allotment that we get or from the insurance companies. And when I talk about insurance companies, I talk about Medicare, Medicaid, third-party insurance companies, and individual billings. So we talked about this long and hard the other night, and with the downtrend, we're proposing an $855,000 revenue target this year, which is down for about $21,000 over last year. I'll stop at that point. Is there any questions in the summary piece of it? Anybody have any thoughts, comments, anything? No?
Yeah.
Okay.
Keep going.
Go to the page 2 of the budget. The full-time salaries account is the account that has the largest increase. It's $134,444. That increase is due to the 8 Safer Grant personnel. That's our portion of the financial obligation. When we accepted the grant, the town had to accept a certain percentage of that. Also, that includes the settlement of the IAFF contract that occurred last year, and there's an increase this year in that budget. I believe it's 2.65%, as well as the contractual agreements for the management of the department. Why the commission clerk went up $9? I'll leave that to Mitch.
Let me address that right now, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
Because it's prevalent in a lot of the budgets you've seen so far, and ones you're going to see tomorrow as well. We have raised the rate of the clerks for the boards and commissions from 17.25 to 17.50. It's a less than 1.5% increase. So you'll see that reflected in a lot of the different boards and commissions, which is, I think, reflected there.
Overtime it represents all the hours worked over 212 hours, which is Garcia. So you'll see that in there. And also the stipends, that increases our portion of the 8 personnel financial, the town's financial obligation.
So theoretically,
Yes.
excuse me, theoretically, we could potentially see the overtime going down a little bit with the addition of, I mean, it's gone down when you look across, but is that, so would there be a trend of overtime going down with the addition of 8 new people?
You'll see it mostly in the replacement salaries account.
Okay, so I
And
jumped
which we'll
ahead, I'm
get-
sorry.
Yes, exactly. In fact, we can go right to replacement salaries account. We actually, I know every year that we come and sit in front of you, that's the biggest question, and we have some information and that we'll provide you as well. But as you'll see in replacement salaries account, that's a decrease of $36,694. Why? There is a decrease due to manning the second ambulance. In the past, we only manned 1 ambulance, and that was downtown at fire headquarters, and any other ambulance call that we had while that one was out, we had to staff it, and that was a minimum of 3 hours, 2 people. Now that we're manning the second ambulance, which is in North Guilford, it's reduced the call-in volume. So that's helped us significantly, and if you look at that trend that happened last year, we went down the replacement salaries in that particular area, as well as this year as well. There are increases in holiday, personal, sick, and vacations, vacation days that firefighters earn due to their longevity, and also for the 8 new personnel that are on staff. This replacement salaries account as well is where the workers' compensation is incorporated into as well. So those on-the-job worker compensation issues are in the replacement of salaries account. And I'll come back to that because we have put together something I think you may or may not have in your packet, but something that will help you understand the replacement salaries account and break it down by category so that you can see how it's divided up and how the monies are spent. So overall, the largest part of our budget, if you look at the subtotal, you'll see that $119,000 of the 164, I think I said, is related to salary items. When you get into the if you will, the variables, if you look down, utilities and fuel, those are based on numbers that were provided by the board, by the finance director, based on contractual agreements that you have for the use of diesel, for the purchase of diesel fuel, gasoline, etc. Now, on top of that, we have, as I mentioned earlier on, we've had an increase in the number of calls for service and the incidents. And as a result, that's part of why the budget, you'll see the increase of $16,000 and $7,000 respectively. Building maintenance, radio receivers, there's no increase. Health and welfare, again, we're mandated, we have to have physicals done. And any new firefighter that comes in, whether it be in the volunteer or the firefighter side, that includes physicals, it includes psychological testing, anything before we, bring them in as a volunteer or as a career. But since we don't have any career hires this year, that's strictly in the volunteer and also the 8 new personnel. Fire prevention, there is no increase.
What is that?
I'm sorry.
What is that fire prevention?
Fire prevention is such as public education, anything that relates to that, pamphlets, brochures, any of that type of thing.
And is
Right
that-
down to the fire caps for the kids, for the schools and things like that.
So that was just going to say, so that's used every year, that amount is, reflects actual?
We try to educate the public as much as we can, whether it be right down to the student, so that they know what to do and what not to do during an emergency. So we've stayed pretty consistent. We feel that's a respectable number and one that we use every year.
Okay.
Operating supplies, you see an $8,000 increase. That's twofold. One is, as I said earlier on, we've had an increase in calls. We see an increase in calls. So we use more. And secondly is when you have medications that we carry on our ambulances and our rescue unit, they have expiration dates, so we have to discard them and you have to purchase new. We use a vendor that is very competitive. In fact, if you look back, you'll see that we've switched vendors. So we're getting the same quality, but we're obviously getting the best price as well. But, so you're seeing the increase in calls, medications are up, and that's why you see an increase of $8,254.
Just to
Yeah,
add
go ahead.
something to the, just for an example, a cardiac arrest, the drugs for a cardiac arrest and some of the equipment associated for one cardiac arrest is $1,000. It's all throwaway. We do on an average about 25 of them a year. So that one particular medical incident is $25,000.
Have you noticed a change in opioid responses?
And we see a lot of those.
Is it going up, going down, staying the same?
About the same.
Yeah.
That has to be disposed of
Yep.
after a year?
Oh, drugs?
Yeah.
Most of those drugs we don't keep very long. They get used.
Mm-hmm.
That's just one. That's just one call that we get.
Yeah.
There's a decrease in the CMed membership. As you may know, we went from New Haven CMed. We are now under Valley Shore Mutual Aid. It dropped last year, went to $12,000, and this year our membership is $9,500, so we have a decrease of $2,500 in there. Education and training. As I mentioned earlier on, there are certain things that we're mandated to do, and most of it is related to OSHA and FPA, and it also includes, we have a SWAT team, we have a diving team, but I want to emphasize, we don't offer training to one individual. So we're looking at what's best for the department. So when we look at providing training, we're doing it for the mass, not for the individual. So if an individual comes to the chiefs and says, I want to go to this class for whatever reason, if it doesn't benefit all of us, or if it's not for a team base, then we're not, he's not approving it at this particular time. So that's important. But we do have SWAT. We have a team of SWAT for the fire department that I believe merges with the police department as well. We have a diving team, which, as many know, over the last couple of years, we've been called into service in the towns of Brantford, Guilford, and across and to our east as well. One of the things that the commission talked a lot about is the vehicle maintenance account. One of our, obviously, one of the single largest accounts that, as you look up the variable expenses there. We have an aging fleet. We have a lot of large vehicle maintenance. We don't have a lot of small vehicle maintenance. So, I mean, we do in the sense that we do have small vehicles, but most of the maintenance budget is dedicated to the large vehicles. And some of those, or a lot of those now are an aging fleet, as you saw in the capital presentation. We have some vehicles that are 15, 18, 20 years old. One of the things that the commission or the administration wrestles with is that, I wish we had a crystal ball. We could tell you that, something's going to break down. It did. This past year, we had 2 generators go. We had an alternator. We had a head gasket go on a vehicle. Those are things that we can't tell until it happens. We just can't tell you. You try to look at it, and again, looking over the 3 years, the chief and the administration said, this is what we need to operate or to maintain our fleet going forward. So, we went back and forth with it, but $175,000, a $5,000 increase based on the 3-year trend is that we agreed to. So from the variable side, or from that side, you see $43,946, which brings us to that roughly $163,375. Okay. Before we move on, get into the last page, let's stop there and answer any questions that anybody might have or anybody would like us to discuss. And we will also, Chief Shove has put together a little bit of a slide, if you will, for us to discuss replacement salaries, because that seems to always be the hot button. So is there any questions, first of all?
Yeah, Ken, just
Yep.
on the SWAT and diver training, and I know you mentioned that we respond regionally on that. Do we get any regional support relative to financing? Do we get grants to pay for equipment? What's the normal routine? Because that's an expense that's being borne by the taxpayers of Guilford, but to the benefit of Madison, Branford, possibly East Haven. So
Yes, we do receive regional funding.
Okay.
Through the, sometimes through the feds,
Right.
sometimes through the state.
Right.
We do receive regional
So, and that's usually one-time grant money, that
Right.
kind of thing.
Like, for instance, our boat, so 2015 or 2016, we received a 30-foot vessel. We needed to replace our own vessel, and we applied for a grant to the federal government to replace that vessel, and 3/4 of it was funded by the federal government, and the town only had to pay approximately $115,000 for a 30-foot public safety vessel. So that's one way. Now that we have that vessel, we're also eligible for further grant funding, which we just received a 2018 equipment grant to help sustain and maintain that asset. So the government is not just, they're not saying, hey, we're going to support this asset if you're going to support it, but they're also giving you the long-term commitment over time to support the program. So yes, if our neighbors call, we would normally go anyways, but we're continuing to support that regional mission
Getting funded.
through federal and state funding.
Perfect.
We also, the year before that, received $25,000 from the feds to support the dive team replacement of dry suits.
So,
Right.
Great. Okay.
So we do receive quite a bit of federal money, as you know.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other
Anybody else?
questions?
Questions? No?
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 Do you want us to take a second to go over that particular?
You have handouts?
Mike, yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have the benefit of video presentation opportunity today. We'll get back to our old meeting room, maybe we'll have that.
Yeah. Do we have, I don't know if we have enough copies.
There should be.
You and I can
Well,
share one.
Yeah,
Want to go right
there you go. That's a good point. Between the
Do you
two.
want me to talk?
Matt, in the presentation, would you like the assistant chief to go from the beginning to the end, or you want to go right to the?
How about we go from the back to the front? I don't mean to be a wise guy, yeah, let's go.
All right, go through it, then I'll have the assistant chief go through it. Wise guy.
I am a wise guy.
He's feeling good.
Start at the back and work our way
Although,
through.
so let me tell you, how
Wait a
many
second.
how many
Wait-
times
wait a
do you
minute.
read the last page before
Is this
you read the
is
first
this a
page?
proposal?
No.
It's on the cost page.
Yeah.
have enough.
Is everybody,
And Mike, you can dispense with the mission statement, that kind of.
Yeah, I'll just, I was gonna stick to, I could start at accomplishments, some of it, let's look at just talk about some of the things we,
Do you have a?
Just go right to replacement salaries.
you wanna go, do you want me to start it, or do you want me to go right through? Okay, so some of the things, just from the beginning, I'll, keep it simple. Some of the accomplishments we put in here, in 2018, we accomplished the implementation of the 2017 SAFER grant for staffing the North Station. That's been a big success. We started staffing that in July of this past year, and it's made a significant impact on our response times, not just to the northern section of town, but it's brought down to the whole entire town based on that. When we brought personnel on, instead of outsourcing it and sending them to the Connecticut Fire Academy for 14 weeks, we ran an in-house recruit firefighter training program to save some money long-term, because we were working in a budget. We had a very minimal budget because it was the last fiscal year when they started in April. We also had successful AFG, which talked about federal funding, the exhaust recovery system. Now that station is staffed 24/7 in North Guilford, we applied for, we have one at headquarters. It looks like big yellow tubes that connect to the trucks if you come up to the firehouse, and it minimizes or lowers long-term cancer in firefighters from the exhaust of the trucks. But it was approximately $50,000 federal grant, and we're responsible for 10%, $5,000, which we were not asking for more money, but we achieved that, $50,000 of federal grant money for that system. We also had a successful port security grant application for equipment for sustainment of that vessel that we talked about. That's 100%, no cost match, approximately $12,000 from the federal government to help support our equipment on the vessel. Some 2019 goals. We're looking at to continue, obviously, the importance of monitoring the impact of the SAFER grant and 1710 compliance and response times for that staffing, making sure that we're meeting the goals of what we propose to the federal government and also to the town, and have good data and statistics to come back for review. And we've been reporting at that at every commission meeting.
What is that reference, 1710?
1710 is the NFPA standard that's what the grant is primarily for. NFPA 1710 is the standard staffing grant that when we applied to the government to look at that staffing impact and making sure we have the right number of people.
It's a regulation.
Okay.
Okay.
Regulation is not actually a word. It's a
It's a
recommendation.
standard, a
It's
consensus
recommendation.
standard,
It's
not a
regulation.
I see. Okay, good, okay.
So the other is looking to enhance our full-time staffing, making sure that we're utilizing to the best we can. So we talk about that replacement or callback, that replacement salaries account. That's a big target that we're using. That now we have two full-time additional staff on staff, and lowering the number of times that somebody's coming back for an incident. We're using callback or second, third, fourth ambulance stuff. We're also continuing to seek grant opportunities to help offset capital projects like the SCBA project when we sat before capital, where our self-contained breathing apparatus is within a couple of years of end of service life. So we're applying for grants, federal grant funding now, to minimize the impact over the next couple of years or potentially offset that long-term impact. And then we also have a Polaris, which we received about 10 to 15 years ago as part of our equipment, and it's at end of service life, so we're looking for seeking grant opportunities to replace that also. All right, replacement salaries, that's the next slide. Some of the replacement salaries account information here. This is the last 3 fiscal years in the proposed 1920 fiscal year. As you can see, the downward trend of utilizing this account, specifically the call-ins, which is about 16% of this. This account predominantly, almost 65% of this account is made up of vacation, holiday, and replacement for officers and firefighters, which is a contractual obligation. So there's minimal, we can't do too much with that part. It's contractual. The pieces that we're looking to better utilize is that call-ins, the 16% of that, to, like I said, what now is full-time staffing with a second ambulance, third and fourth, and major incidents, of looking how we could better utilize that money during those incidents in that area. You want me to stay here and see if questions?
Any questions on that particular
Pretty good.
Yeah. Sick time, does that include?
People are on workers' comp?
Yeah, that's 12%. Also, if people are in workers' comp in that spot, workers' comp and sick time for the year.
Good.
That's another big variable. If we lose somebody for the year, it's
Right.
gonna hurt us in that area.
What is the deputy fire marshal sliver?
So that deputy fire marshal, we have a full-time deputy fire chief's the fire marshal. We have a full-time deputy fire marshal that's 40 hours a week. That supplemental staffing is when that, for instance, inspections, large jobs like Yale Guilford, for instance, is a significant project going on up there that requires the fire marshal's office to be at those locations for inspections with the building department. So that's part of any overtime, or we're going to use deputy fire marshals.
Fire investigations.
Investigations.
Things like that.
Okay. So the fire marshal's out at another location, so you have to replace him back at the headquarters?
Or a large fire comes in, if you need more than one investigator on the scene of a fire, or if any one of those things, or there's multiple projects at the same time. If that makes...
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get my arms around it, so he's elsewhere, so you
De-
need
yeah,
to replace
deputy
him
fire
with
marshal.
another...
Right.
Another
Has
firefighter.
multiple responsibilities, design plan reviews, fire investigations, major projects that are going on.
Yeah.
So you'll bring in another part-time.
Those are the things that take him away from the
Exactly,
headquarters. Okay,
to be able to
understood.
perform.
Any other questions in replacement salary?
No, I think that-
Okay. The next slide is performance measures. So some of the other things that, when we talk about that data and that radar of how we're achieving our goals and what we're doing, our calls for service, again, there's 5 years of data. Those are calendar years from 2014 to 18. And we're continuing in the upward trend for call volume that continues to increase. Average response times, again, the SAFER grant has had a significant impact on our average response times from 2016 to 2018. The North Station staffing, which used to have a significant longer response time, has now knocked the numbers down overall throughout the entire town, not just then. It's also offset the replacement salaries account. So it's been significant in those two areas.
Mike, before you move off that, when you're talking about average response times, are we talking about for all calls or for EMT calls?
All calls.
All
So this
calls.
is every call.
Do you have that data broken out by EMT calls as
by
well?
EMS? Yep. So EMS.
I'm sorry, not EMT, EMS.
Yeah, EMS, rescue, fire. We can break that data out
I'd
anyways.
love to see that data.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the big thing for the SAFER grant predominantly is responsible for staffing of firefighters on fires. But the alternate impact to that is the getting a paramedic, ALS, or advanced life support at somebody's house within less than eight minutes. So if it took 8 minutes, we're meeting the national average. That's what that is. So if we look at specifically, heart attacks, difficulty breathing, all those things, the national average is less than 9 minutes to have that paramedic on scene, which we're meeting that goal now.
Yeah, not to diminish the value of having firefighters up there, but in large measure,
Absolutely.
the staffing of the North Guilford Station was accomplished because of the need for EMS services, predominantly EMS services.
It's changed lives. And
great.
fortunately, we have case examples of lives that we've saved
I have
this
a
year.
friend.
Yeah. It's been good.
Real quick on the calls, 2017, there seems to, what, any idea what the reasoning was?
Why we're lower there?
Yeah.
It's hard to gauge, 1 year or 2 years
Good
at a
year.
time. No, and even storms, storms have a big impact on those things.
Yeah.
So some of the other things like EMS, our neighboring town, Branford, staff their third ambulance and fourth ambulance, so they're starting to adapt. So that's some of that trending is less times we're going mutual aid to one of our neighboring towns with EMS. There's a lot of variables in that, but like I said, predominantly of 5 years, we're still going up. But yeah, they're going to have some years that are hit or miss.
So this data includes mutual aid data, mutual aid
Yep,
trips as well?
All calls, yep. But we can break it out. The nice part with our CAD system is we can break it out however, if you want to see it, we can depict it anyway. The next slide is another area that we get measured in. Usually only happens once every 10 years, now I think down to 5 years on the Insurance Services Office, or ISO rating. This, again, over time, is gone from, today, we're sitting at a Class 3 department. The slide to the right is how many towns in the state of Connecticut are at a Class 3, and the slide to the left is nationwide, how many Class 3s there are. So we're in that, top 10% above that for all towns in the state of Connecticut for ISO rating. What that affects is fire insurance ratings for businesses and homeowners. So over the last 25 years, we've continued from an 8B to a Class 3 on the ISO scale, which has had significant savings on insurance. Questions?
Good. Questions, anything further? Jonathan?
Just wrong time to ask about capital operating budget?
Yeah, we can do capital.
Do you want
Was
to
there any other questions to the?
move on to the next
Actually, no.
section?
Excellent job, Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Go ahead.
The, for the capital operating budget request for this year, the completion of the replacement of the hose we're requesting. Also, an electric stretcher. I know in the past we have purchased, I think, we have one left that's manual, which helps, the electric stretcher helps in obviously back injuries and things like that as it relates to the personnel that we use. Air cylinders is at 29,000. Those are the air cylinders, the bottles that we use for obviously self-contained breathing apparatus. Hazmat equipment at 16,000, and we've seen some cases, as you know, here in town and other towns that we've been called to for that. The used bus, in the past, the used bus, we would get something from, or we would do something with the Park and Rec, but this year I guess they're not doing anything for their replacement of their bus. So, and believe it or not, we do use that bus to transport personnel. And then the AFG grant, if the department receives the grant, which you heard Mike refer to, I think it was, what, $750,000 for the entire SCBA. If we do get that grant, then our contribution would be 10% of that, which would be $75,674. I think the chief at a previous meeting discussed the options of an ambulance remount versus a new one, complete certified chassis and box. But if we do the entire thing, you'll see it just below the total line. It would be $214,490 versus just the remount of $140,000. Okay.
Question,
So-
the anticipated lifetime of a new ambulance versus the ambulance remount, what's the
Chief, what's the?
20 years.
20 years?
For the module.
Okay.
The chassis would have to get replaced every 2 to 3 years, just as we've been doing for the last 20-some-odd years.
So I think that was the question I had too,
Right.
right? So if you buy the new ambulance, then you don't need to do the remount for
Right.
X amount
That's
of time?
Yeah, for 2 to 3 years out.
For 2 to
based
3
on
years
miles,
out?
yeah.
And then how often are you doing the remount now?
Every 2 years.
Are you talking about the box, or are you talking about the actual chassis?
I don't know if I
So the
understand
chassis.
the whole thing, but I'm trying to
The
think,
chief
like, if you
explained
bought a new
that.
ambulance, does it give you
Jonathan,
better payback, you
a
know?
remount, what a remount normally involves is taking the module, the ambulance module,
Yep.
off the current existing chassis, which has over 107,000 miles on it, and putting it on a brand-new chassis. That's a remount,
Yep.
okay? And then we do some of the electrical, and basically, we bring it back, all right? The present box is a 1994 that would be sending down there. It has a lot of corrosion on it, and it's basically hit its lifetime, as far as I'm concerned, as far as expectancy. So, I mean, we could spend $140,000 and bring that box back here, but I don't think it's a sound investment for the town's money.
So money-wise, it makes more sense to buy the ambulance at
And
214
buy the new one.
than to do a remount this year and a remount 2 years down the road.
Right,
Right.
we'll be doing another
We'll end
one
up
in about 3
spending,
years.
we'll end up spending more
But
money.
that'll give us 2 brand-new boxes. We purchased a box a year ago, a brand-new, whole new ambulance a year ago, just to give us the second one, which will give us a good base to rotate all of them through again.
Okay, but I'm just trying to make sure I understand the financial outflows. So if we spend 214,000 now, that would be opposed to spending $280,000 for 2 ambulance remounts in the same 3-year period?
That's correct.
Is that right?
Right.
To look
So
at
it
it,
seems like a no-brainer.
to look at it another way, the ambulance remount for $140,000, we basically have to do that every 2 or 3
Right.
years. And the 75,000 incremental cost, it is something we have to do every 20 years.
No,
Is
we have
that-
to do a remount every 2 years.
That's the 140, but the box,
Well,
if we buy the whole.
normally a remount costs us about 100,000.
Yeah, the increase has gone up because the box is so old that we have now. It's more cost efficient to buy the newer box. So things that like deteriorate that box, the liquid salts on the road and those things, so the corrosion of that box is increased and it's gonna cost more more money to put for the remount itself of that module.
Right, but the incremental 75 is the box, and then with that box, in another 2 or 3 years, since we have a new box, it's not gonna be 140, it's going to be lower than that, the remount will only be 100.
That's
Right, yep,
That's correct.
that's correct.
Okay, so.
Oh, I see.
That does sound like a
Sounds
no-brainer to
right,
me.
yeah.
I think part
And-
of your
and then the
question
rema-
also was the chassis itself, so.
Right, well, that's the chassis, which has to do, so
Right.
that's roughly 100, not 140, if we have a up-to-date box
Box.
to put on it,
Right, right.
and we have to do that every 2 or 3 years.
That's correct.
Right.
Okay.
And that 214 for the new ambulance is out the door, ready to drive.
Right.
It's not like it's gotta come in and we've gotta.
All we gotta do is
Add
put our
anything.
radios in it. That's it.
And
Okay.
if we get the new ambulance, how long would we wait till we would do any kind of remount?
3 years.
Depends on how we rotate them around, so.
The biggest issue with this is the age of the box.
Yeah, yeah. The mileage on the chassis is consistent over the 3 years.
Right, that's
just like
the rotating, but this box is.
Correct, the box is what is,
25 years old, right?
yeah.
That's an estimate for the 140 for the remount. It could be more. Okay, but that's a hard number for the purchase of the new one.
So in terms of this list, do you have it, is this the way you would prioritize it, or would it be prioritized differently? If you had it in line with like what your first priority
But
is?
the ambulance would be the highest priority.
Okay.
But the air cylinders are high priority because,
I know everything is important, but in terms of
Well,
important.
the air cylinders have a 15-year life expectancy by the feds. And you have to take them all out of service. So we need to replace those.
Okay.
Now, the used bus, that's a purchase cost, 15,000
Hmm?
The used bus.
for used bus?
No, it's a used bus, yeah. I'm just guesstimating what that
And
costs.
just estimate of 15,000, okay.
We're
kind of
looking
small-
around,
smaller
someone get
bus
one
then.
donated to us, but we're just putting money out there for it.
Are there any grant?
Mike's working on trying to get us a donated bus.
All right.
Fine.
To anticipate the administration has been exceptional on looking for opportunities for grants. For everything, and as you just saw in here, the AFG grant, instead of paying $750,000, looking at getting a grant where you only have to contribute 10% of that. So, I mean, I know going back years, the amount of money that has been through grants and through grants and things like that has been exceptional. So we'll continue to do that. They'll continue to do that.
Yeah.
And we're always asking that question as well.
15, 20 minutes.
Did that answer your question, Veronica? Anybody else?
I'm good.
No? And I think the 5-year capital was
Speaks
already,
for
that was
itself,
in the
yeah.
lab, one of the budget workshops that you had.
It was.
Are there any questions on anything in the fire department budget that we didn't answer that you'd like to ask?
15, 20 minutes.
No, this is really good presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good?
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, and also, I complimented Mark Larkins and the Public Works Commission. The same thing, I know the Fire Commission works closely and diligently with the staff, and I appreciate the work done by that commission as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, communications.
I forgot, I was gonna get up and slide away on this one, but I guess I'll just sit here.
What's the issue with that? That's the
That's
20-minute.
right, there's communications in here.
Right, yeah.
Are they doing it?
They're going, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying thank you and getting up and.
Oh, I thought I was
Okay,
too. I
you are
completely forgot
sticking around,
communications was in here, it's my mistake.
That's right.
Sorry about that.
Okay, well, this should be about 15 minutes, I would suspect.
15 minutes?
Could
No
be
pressure,
quicker.
no pressure.
1 minute, half
All right, we're gonna get right into the
Communications.
communications budget. Assistant Chief Cheryl is gonna go over the slide for the biggest increase in the communications budget, which is the public safety IT position.
Yep.
And then we can discuss the other line items. It's all yours.
Thanks. So the same thing, I did a slideshow for this. I'll flip right to the, say, accomplishments. I'd like to just talk about some of the accomplishments and the goals we've done in the past year and through the next year. Consolidation of all cell phones and data management into one plan, working collectively with all departments to manage everything in one plan so we can collectively manage all the devices. Successfully transitioned into the new text to 911 system. So that was another big change this year. Now that's up and running. So if you couldn't call, somebody can text 911. Upgraded the town marina camera system and integrated into a central camera system. So we worked with the marina they lost their camera system to reestablish it and get it up. An integration into the AT&T FirstNet on many of the primary public service devices. So if anyone's not familiar with FirstNet, it's put together by the federal government, and it's for all first responders or public safety. And we transitioned from the AT&T accounts over to FirstNet, a majority of those, which it's a better system for public safety. Completed transitioning and upgrading fire department network to Windows 10 clients and also to a 2016 domain for all fire and communications systems.
Can we go back to the FirstNet thing?
Yep.
That's an overlay network for public safety, so you're not competing with the general demands for bandwidth in emergencies, is that correct?
Correct, yep.
And that has a higher priority for restoration during times of
When something
system
happens.
outages, correct?
Yep, so if a tower is lost, or if we had to get a temporary tower in place, or that is the primary focus, to keep that up before anything else.
Was there any additional cost to us to move to that network?
No, it's actually made it more competitive because it's fixed rates by the government, so it actually has forced Verizon, one of our other carriers, to sharpen the pencil a little bit to be competitive against FirstNet. So having the power of those things has definitely helped.
Thank you.
2019 goals. Biggest thing, as Chief said, we're looking to put together or add a full-time public safety IT position to manage all the public safety information and technology for both police and fire. We can get into that in the next slide. Enhance emergency communication information sharing utilizing the VOCI system, which we upgraded in VOCI to which we started already for all emergency management and between all departments. Continue seeking strategies to better manage the townwide data plans and also cybersecurity. It's a big, obviously, continuous threat, and that's part of also adding another full-time staffing position to look at those cybersecurity things, to better manage them. Complete and build a redundant cellular-based VPN network for the town public safety radio sites. We currently manage about 7 sites for our town radio system through microwave, and we're adding layers to that to be able to have redundancies and failovers if we lost a microwave system. And transition installing new cellular modems to FirstNet and 5G compatible devices for public safety. So obviously not just FirstNet, but 5G, on the brink of 5G technology for data bandwidth. We are making sure that any modems that go into the fire trucks or to police cars, the goal is that making sure that they're 5G ready and compatible. So we have the most latest and greatest technology as times change. Go to 2 slides. We'll talk about the public safety IT position. And we've brought this, this has been here before. We've talked about this in terms of the goals and directions. A lot of this too was from the Bloom Shapiro study in 2015. That we've talked about a lot of these things. What we did is we put together devices from 2015 fire department and police department of where we have not just devices but things that we manage that are IT related, and it continues to grow. You can see some of the difference in physical sites, 5 physical sites to 10 physical sites in 2018. In 2015, we were managing 63 physical devices, and now we're up to 142 physical devices managed at all sites, and that's between switching gear, modems, all IT in general that we manage continues to increase and grow. 15 mobile managed devices. We're up to 61 physical mobile device managed that we're using mobile device management tools to manage those things remotely. 52 managed Active Directory, and we're up to 75 Active Directory users in our domain now. That includes a career volunteer, everybody that uses the system full-time. And the police department, we work directly with them too to help manage these things, and the goal would be that between both police and fire, that full-time position can be utilized by either of the organizations, or really any town, IT shared in general, to help manage anything IT. The continues for printers, switches, and networks continues to go up. The police department is also obviously, besides the in-car dash cameras, but also body cameras. They're at the brink of potentially going into those things.
When you showed this here, you said fire communications department, but the IT person would deal with any fire IT, right?
Fire and police.
Yeah.
That right now it's through contract services. Both fire and police are contract services for IT services, and we're looking at utilizing the money that I'd say a good portion of the money that already exists in contract services between police and fire, and having adding full-time staff, one full-time staff to manage that instead of contract
You know what, I was
service.
misreading this as fire communications versus fire department, but it is the two. Yeah, I got it. Okay, thank you.
And again, just for a quick level set, Mike, and I apologize for not doing this ahead of time. The assumption here is that everybody understands the work that you guys have been doing. We established a working group between Mary Jane and Tony from the IT side on the town, as well as the police and fire department, largely as a result of recommendations that were made a couple of years ago, but with the original technology efficiency study by Bloom Shapiro. And there are a couple of things that are important to note. And it was designed to try to this working group was tasked with coming up with a solution to provide better IT coverage for all 3 entities. So there, as Mike just said, there are expenses currently. There are contracted services expenses, both police and fire department. They happen to be the same guy, which is kind of odd. But it talks to the commonality of the systems and the ability to integrate both. One of the other concerns, I know the police department's had this for years, they moved away from it, and we're starting to creep back towards it, is not having a sworn officer doing IT support work. Basically taking a police resource, and taking them off the street and not available to do their job. Same thing on the fire department side. Even though Mike does this stuff as a hobby, he's got other duties that he has to do. So that was the charge to this group, and the recommendation that they're presenting today is one that will not only enhance the IT support and consolidate the IT support for public safety, but will also provide a backup to Tony Santangelo over on the town side, who currently is managing the balance of the town's networks and systems by himself. So this will create a backup. We have not yet gone to the point of talking about an overall structure for IT support for the town, but we are certainly starting to move towards that way. The last piece of this will eventually be some form of, or potential form of integration with the school systems. And there could well be at some point a single IT infrastructure, but this starts to get us there. Sorry to take your thunder away.
That's a good summary. That's it. I had those 2 slides and questions on any of the manage.
I guess I have a question. The current status is that you've got the contractor for 36,000.
Right.
And then the future state would be a new employee at a salary estimate of 85,000 plus benefits.
And the remainder would come from the
Police, contract service with
the
the
guys in
police.
blue.
Oh, do they have another
Yeah.
They have
amount
They have another
that
30,000
they're paying?
in there.
Do you know that?
About 30,000 on their side.
Okay, so then the status quo is really about 65,000 right now for the contracting services, and then an $85,000 permanent position.
Correct.
So I see that you still have that in the budget for the communication. The computer software and hardware support, 26,000?
Correct, because the big thing is the VOG system took that place and
Okay, so
is in,
that's what that is.
it's sitting in our budget, correct?
Okay, it has VOG at 50,000 though, and computer software and hardware
Well,
support of
that's
26.
that's our service contracts for our CAD system.
So the full amount of your current the contract that you have with your person
It's 36.
is out,
Right.
is not
Is
in
out.
here. I just want to make that clear.
Correct.
Because
That's correct.
if you look at this, it kind of looks like, I just want to make sure it's clear to everyone that it's clear that that is, this would have been $35,000 higher without it. I just want.
So obviously, you're kind of dissatisfied in some regard with the contracted service and think that you can.
No, that
no,
is by
not at
far
all.
not where we're going.
Well, you think there's advantages to going towards the.
Yes.
We do. We do, including one sworn officer at the police department being able to go back to full-time service.
So that's another component outside of the contracted person. There's someone
Correct.
at the police station who's doing a lot
Yeah,
of
it
IT work right now.
was doing most of it on an overtime basis.
We want a dedicated person here with us, not just on call.
So the new full-time person is hopefully going to relieve all the work that the contractor's doing and all the work that the sworn officer's doing
Correct.
at the police station.
Correct.
And assistant town hall.
And provide backup and support for
A fair amount, and
balance of
having,
town government.
having the, our contractors, he's not 20, he can be there when he can be there, but there's times stuff that comes up day to day, password resets and all those things, and those get taken care of internally. There's not just me, but there's a group of people that can manage those things, but this is one more thing that can say the day-to-day stuff, as Chief Hutchinson says, the password resets, the day-to-day switching out, profiling images for computers, for iPads, that stuff can get done by somebody that's their job, IT staff. And also providing a redundancy to Tony, so in the event that, somebody wants to go on vacation or there's 24/7, our own people, our
Ballpark in a week, how much time are you spending doing that?
10 hours, good amount. That's on the clock. So I do a lot. It's 24/7. There's a lot of stuff we do today mobily. Somebody needs something done at 7 o'clock at night. We're 24/7, so it's all the time. But generally, it's any way you can offset that and have full-time people dedicated to it and redundancies. And so the cybersecurity stuff today, we're trying to stay ahead of it and stay ahead of those things and our firewalls and making sure stuff doesn't get in there to shut things down. It's a lot.
So on the maintenance contract, the 36,000 for the contracted IT person came out, and that's in another line now, right?
No, it's gone.
Completely gone.
It's gone, it's part of the.
In reality.
Okay.
If
With the
we don't get
potential of the
the
new hire.
IT person, we
It
need
goes
to put
back
the
in.
36,000 back into the budget.
Okay, but then there's the 38,000 increase for the VOC system. Can you just quick, what is the VOC system again?
So we started with emergency management. It's a townwide system that the first initial focus, and that's what we've used it for 5 years, is emergency management and fire department operations. So we do like daily operations, but it's a program that it just doesn't do emergency management. The police department's using it now. We're bringing other town departments. And over the next 6 months, we're transitioning other departments into the system for day-to-day operations or daily operations. Basically digitalizing what was paper process and digitalizing it into digital workflow and digitalizing process.
So people are, what, reporting incidents to a website? or-
So absolutely, it's a cloud-based system. So let me give you an example: vehicle checks, self-contained breathing apparatus inspections, timesheets. So we've actually, in the last year and a half to 2 years, we've digitalized our timesheets, and it gives us the greater ability to add data sets to calculate those things, to look at data more granular. We could break overtime up in 16 pieces of how we look, how we use money, how we do things. It's basically a digital workflow process, software system.
And did that give us any savings somewhere else that now you can enter this online, or?
In terms of savings of, hopefully, instead of having, paper process where where something is on paper before and we'd have to manually go through. I'll give you an example. SCBA, one of our self-contained breathing apparatus inspections, in the last couple of years we found a failure in the same piece of equipment, where it's a life safety piece of equipment. If that failed in the middle of a fire for a firefighter, that would basically helped us identify that. It's like a radar tool. So instead of going through 1,000 pieces of paper and trying to find the one air pack, we have now a digital process that says, hey, this thing failed 10 times. There's a problem here. And it's not worth putting money in to send back to the vendor to be able to repair it. So basically it's gone back. So that value in repair and costs and things like that is probably where we measure how much we've saved.
I want to talk a little bit about the vehicle program with.
So vehicle maintenance?
Yep.
Yeah, so vehicle maintenance, another good example, and this is what we started with. I call it the what's busted list, or what vehicle's broken. And when from the time the person has, hey, my seatbelt's broken, or hey, the vehicle's leaking oil, they're able to go right onto the PC, the iPad, track that and say, hey, this unit, this is the problem. So the same thing, looking at reoccurring problems in vehicles when it comes to maintenance, of saying, hey, instead of replacing this windshield wiper or this headlight for the third time in a month, well, maybe there's a bigger problem. So instead of changing bulbs, we're actually starting to target, let's actually look at replacing the whole piece, or maybe there's a greater problem in that system. So basically attaches work to the money, when we have problems or our vehicle maintenance, that we can account for those things at a very granular level.
It also alerts the people who need to be alerted immediately. So I would be notified, depending on the level of it, the assistant chief would be notified, but before that, the mechanics would be notified that this piece of apparatus has a major issue and requires immediate attention. We know because the mechanic acknowledges that he received it, and then the mechanic goes there, actually fixes it, and puts in a ticket through VOC that says it's been repaired. So we know that it's been repaired.
Okay.
Mike, you want to talk a little bit about personnel certifications and the ability to track that as well?
Yeah, so the same thing in the last 3 months, we've had our part-time admin. One of the recent projects, she took all of our paper training folders, which was in paper, 2 drawers worth of paper training folders, scanned all of this in over time in the last 3 months, and now this gives us to say, when we apply for grants, or when does somebody's license expire, basically it allows us to track and account for all those things in terms of compliance for regulations, laws, and making sure that people are trained to where they need to be trained to. And you could easily search for anything you want. It's like Excel, Access, and all that stuff, and all in digital process. And then the other piece too, hopefully in time, in a shorter period of time, the police department started using this 24/7 for all the same things, for tracking their vehicle inspections or their what's busted list, or hey, this vehicle needs to go down to Public Works. And in time, the goal is now this next department bring Public Works up, where you can track the status of that vehicle and the problems from beginning to end, where they can look on one dashboard and everybody's in one system where you can get all the data from.
Police department is also using something for scheduling and for payroll reporting.
I think they're using something different for scheduling and payroll, but they're using general daily operations. They're using VOG.
And lastly, I know you've started discussions with Steve Nydorf at our facilities department.
Correct.
About
Building and facilities is using it to track and manage all building things that are in building, like HVAC equipment. This is the piece of equipment we have. This is when it was purchased. Here's its life expectancy, and you have all of that. Well, how many how many hot water heaters do we have in town? We have 15. All of that data is in a central location, and also. Kevin McGee and the tree warden side has been using. He's got over 200 trees tracked just since he started using it in the last probably 8 months. He's tracking every tree managed. He's got pictures of the tree, all his interaction with residents throughout town, and his basically a whole book of what he's done and all his hard work with the tree stuff.
Okay, I'm starting to get a little
pretty
bit better feel for what this thing does.
Jonathan, what's unique about this? It's not
Yeah.
a one-size-fits-all software package. It's all modular, and you can actually most of the applications are being built internally based on departmental needs. It's that simple to put these modules in. You don't need to write an API to every system. It basically is a pick up, plug it, put your build your own room, right? These are all based on rooms, and you build your room. And it's highly customizable.
Okay, and then the cost is carried in the communications
Yeah,
department, but it extends out to a lot of
this
different
is an expense that we have been running through communications with the fire department for a number of years with VOC. Mike and a couple of the other folks have been virtually development partners with VOC in terms of helping them build their municipal book of business, their public safety side. The fact that we've been operating beyond the original license agreement, with the addition of the police department and some of the other town departments, we needed to upgrade the license. So we now have a site license or
Enterprise.
an enterprise license at this point. So that's why the increase in the number that he mentioned.
Okay, I appreciate it. I really didn't know what that system did, so.
You also talked about
you
talked about the cost savings over time, and as we continue to migrate in other departments, there may be software savings where they normally have this type of software. We could use a common software where everybody's together, similar to Munis, where pieces of Munis are used where it starts to branch out and we're using the full capacity of the software we have. Instead of having 20 softwares here, maybe have 15, or what can we cut back over time to... The nice part about it is it's multifunctional that can, over time, it's all under one roof.
But the enterprise license is shown in the communications budget?
Yeah, we needed a place to put it.
Right.
Because there's going to be multiple departments using it, so.
But that's my question. It's not, there's not a separate VOC expense in building, grounds, or police?
No, there
It's
isn't.
all right
Just
here.
one. It's all one.
You didn't maybe want to put it in IT?
Eventually, Jonathan, yeah, I'd love to have a single IT budget. But then we have a whole challenge with reporting structures and chain of command stuff, which we're not prepared to deal with right now. And that's related to the other IT personnel. Good. Anything further on communications? No?
Good for today. Keep getting an earful.
More than you wanted.
Yeah.
Right? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. With that, we've concluded our business. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn until we meet again tomorrow morning at 8:30.
Second.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none, motion carries.
No, it's middle of hockey season, so.